Since 2015, Jared Stillman has rocked Nashville sports.
That team freaking stinks.
And now he's back. The takes are hotter than ever.
I mean, let's be honest, he just can't coach.
Welcome to Stillman and Company.
Stillman and Company, the 440 Sports Network, is presented by Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. On today's program, we have a New York Times story on VrabelGate. That's right. You know, the New York Times, the people that employed Dianna Russini. Yes, they wrote a piece that was kind of investigative into Dianna. The biggest news being Dianna makes $800,000 a year, or I should say made $800,000 a year. We have that we will get to today. That's a big topic on today's program, what we learned. And I got to say, there's one person in particular I'm kind of pissed off about. That's going to lead off our show. Then Pekka Rinne made the Pro Hockey or the Hockey Hall of Fame. I guess it's not the Pro Hockey Hall of Fame. It's the Hockey Hall of Fame. Made the Hockey Hall of Fame. Pekka Rinne? We'll get to that. Plus, Brendan Sorsby got the NFL's foot up his ass yesterday. We'll get to that. And while I don't care about getting ratioed on Twitter, apparently some people say whenever I have a controversial take, they say like, oh, you're getting ratioed on Twitter, man. And every time I'm like, who gives a fuck about getting ratioed on Twitter? There is one tweet in particular I'm getting absolutely housed for. We're going to get to that as well. But first, we're going to tell you about our presenting sponsor. That is Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. I love Hiller. They take great care of my home. They can do the exact same for you. Hiller has been taking care of my home for years. I tell people, look, if we ever have an issue with our electrical, with our plumbing, with our HVAC, it's real easy. We go to happyhiller.com right there on the website. Boom, they're out here. There's not even a discussion. It's just here comes Hiller. They show up. Again, you get the notifications on your phone. They tell you how far the tech is away. You can book it within a 2-hour window. It's incredible. And that's why I love Hiller Plumbing, Heating, Cooling, and Electrical. And I'm telling you, if you use Hiller, you will as well. They have a 100% satisfaction guarantee of happy you'll be or the service is free. So if a customer does not like the work performed, Hiller will make it right. Again, I've been using Hiller in my home since I got my first home in 2018. They are proud supporters of the Preds, the Vols, and Vandy. That is Hiller. Call the Happy Face Truck today. TDG says, hit the like button and subscribe. It is free. It is free to hit that like button. It is free to subscribe. It is free to do all of that. So go ahead and do all of those things. Belva says the same thing. Smash the like button. Chris says, not this again. And Kelsey says, I was going through withdrawal. I'll get my Vrabel Russini fix today. Like and subscribe. Like I said, subscribing is free. Why haven't you? Agreed. So let's get to the big story of the day today. And that is Vrabel and Russini, the New York Times, which owns The Athletic. And while there is kind of a gray area between the difference between the New York Times and The Athletic, the reality is The Athletic is the New York Times. Whenever you go to a story about somebody from The Athletic wrote, i.e. Joe Rex wrote, you're going to the New York Times website. So the New York Times, the owners of The Athletic, released an investigative piece about Dianna Russini ahead of their yet-to-be-finished investigation into her reporting as the publication's senior NFL insider. Now, I don't know if I have the time to catch everybody up on this, but I feel like for the most part, didn't you guys know what's happened up until now? Dianna was there. She was screwing with Vrabel, allegedly. She was screwing around with Vrabel. The pictures came out. The Athletic denied it. She denied it. Vrabel denied it. More came out. She resigned. Vrabel basically copped to it. And The Athletic has launched an investigation and has egg all over their faces. All over their faces. And I, this morning, woke up at 5:45 because that's when my son decided to wake everybody in our household up. And this morning we were getting him ready for school and he was having breakfast and he was playing around. And all of a sudden I saw my phone. Oh, we got a Vrabel Russini story we got to talk about. I almost told Lindsay, I was like, Lindsay, you're on baby duty because we got this New York Times. I got to read this. So there were a couple of things in the report that I saw that I thought were, interesting, but not that interesting. The big thing that's grabbing headlines is that Dianna was making $800,000 a year at The Athletic. And a lot of people are like, $800,000? I'm actually a little surprised Dianna wasn't making more. I mean, the insider game, it's a dirty game, if I'm being honest with you. These people cozy up to people inside the league, coaches, executives, league executives, agents, players. They kiss that ass, they lick that taint, and then all of a sudden, they come out there and they say, my sources have told me Washington might be interested in adding this guy to be a defensive back. And they have no idea if it's true or not. They're only reporting what somebody told them. Sometimes they get flat out lied to. And yet, they just keep on reporting it. And while, yes, they all rush to Twitter to be able to put out there, breaking news, Johnny Joe has signed with the practice squad. That's not really the value of the insider. The value of the insider is to have somebody perpetuate the rumor cycle so that shows like this one and all the shows on ESPN and all the can run with it and say, okay, Adam Schefter is reporting the Titans are interested in locking up Peter Skoronski. What should that contract be? And then it gets bigger, right? Let's say one of these insiders that has the credibility, Rappaport, Schefter, Russini, Breer, you name it, Pelissero. Let's say one of them puts out there, Joe Burrow unhappy with the Bengals, may look for a trade at the end of the year. That's going to blow up. Every show's going to talk about it. Every team, every city. What does our team need to do to get Joe Burrow? And it's all about the clicks and the recognition and everything else. It's a dirty game. It is what it is. But you have to break the news at some point for people to think that you have the credibility that you can also spread gossip. I did not know this. This was included in the New York Times story. Dianna in 2019 reported that Doug Marrone was going to get fired, and then he didn't. That's a pretty big thing to miss on. So I say all of that because, again, I think those guys make millions. I mean, I think Schefter makes like $9 million a year. So if Schefter's making $9 million and Rappaport's making in the millions and all these guys are making in the millions, $800,000 isn't really that big of a deal. But that's the big thing. It's the headline at Fox News' website. It's the headline. That is not a big deal to me. Here's what stood out to me in the story. The first thing involves the fact that Dianna Russini FaceTimed a coach. Now, it doesn't say who, but Dianna Russini FaceTimed a coach in order to get, it apparently was not Vrabel, FaceTimed a coach in order to get out of a speeding ticket or a texting while driving ticket. And she told the cops, I'm an NFL insider. I'm trying to break news that Sean McDermott just got fired. So I got to send out this tweet. And the cop didn't care. And so she FaceTimed a coach and the cop let her off. I mean, okay. The thing that stood out to me, this is from the Athletic story. Quote, as part of the review, the Athletic is looking into Dianna's involvement in a January 2025 article inside Mike Vrabel's year off. Miss Ha, who is the spokesperson for the New York Times, said, the roughly 4,400-word article was written by another reporter, Zach Rosenblatt, after Miss Russini helped her broker the coach's cooperation, arranging breakfast for the three of them so Mr. Rosenblatt could make his pitch. Mr. Rosenblatt did not respond to a message-seeking comment. Ms. Ha said the Athletics review of that article does not go beyond Ms. Russini's role. Well, it should go into Mr. Rosenblatt's role, but that's a different discussion for a different day. So this is the story. I remember clicking and reading it and saying, oh, hey, the first paragraph's talking about my favorite restaurant in town, Corner Pub, where I would run into Vrabel from time to time. And from time to time, it was a little awkward, but I like Vrabel, so it is what it is. But they're saying, hey, Russini brokered Vrabel's cooperation so that Zach Rosenblatt could write this huge article, and it was over breakfast. I wonder where Dianna and Vrabel stayed the night before. Surely separate quarters. So that was kind of the first thing I looked at, and I was like, that's a little odd. That's a little interesting. The second thing that popped out to me, quote, that April, and this is the April of 2020, that April, Miss Russini and Mr. Vrabel appeared with about a half dozen others via Zoom on a game show hosted by Barstool Sports. Now, we've all seen the one about something, I forget the cut that went viral and everybody about how Dianna was basically talking shit about her husband, part 87. But in this, quote, tell me something a man might do to get a woman in the mood, the host asked. Kiss her, Miss Russini replied. I feel like this is good advice for you guys, too. Mr. Vrabel looked up from his keyboard. Quote, I'm paying very close attention, he said. Fucking morons. Vrabel, he thinks he's so smart. Oh, Lord. There was a wild story in there. I guess Dianna claimed on a podcast that she claimed on ESPN, on Get Up, that she was able to break the Julio Jones trade, not because she was fucking the coach of the team that was acquiring Julio Jones and would be going out on the lake with that coach the next week, but she was in Atlantic City and saw Black 11 come up on a roulette wheel, which made her spidey senses tingle and made her think that Julio Jones was getting traded. Apparently, Dianna reached out to the CEO of the Times after all of this went down, which I also thought was kind of crazy. That Dianna reached out to the CEO, and this is kind of leading me into what I don't like so much. Miss Russini and Mr. Vrabel worked together to coordinate their responses to the post, according to someone who had conversations with each of them. Miss Russini eventually called her employer, but her first call was not to her bosses at The Athletic. Instead, she reached out directly to Miss Levin, the chief executive of the Times company. So she reached out to the New York Times CEO instead of going to her direct reports because she wanted to say something. She wanted to make her case. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, again, go to the head of the snake. Miss Ha, the Times company spokesperson, said that the chief executive said, you've got to call Stephen and David, referring to Stephen Ginsburg, the Athletic's executive editor, and David Perpich, publisher of The Athletic and vice chairman of the Times company. The chief executive had no other involvement after that, said the spokeswoman, who declined to make Miss Levin, Mr. Perpich, and Mr. Ginsburg available for interviews. Okay, so this is the root of my problem with this story. This is a New York Times story reporting on the New York Times that goes out of its way to clear the chief executive of the New York Times. Boy, that seems honest. And then the New York Times does not make the chief executive in the story, the editor of The Athletic, the vice chairman and head of The Athletic, does not make them available to interviews for the New York Times. Even Zach Rosenblatt, who writes for The Athletic, thus writing for the New York Times, was unavailable for comment for this story. The New York Times is treating an investigative story about themselves as if it's not about themselves. And that's fucking bullshit. It then included this wild ending to this story that I would say I thought Dianna Russini knew better, but Dianna Russini's a fucking idiot, so who knows? But in early May, and so again, just so you can think about this, the draft is in late April. The draft's in late April. Dianna Russini resigned the week after Caroline Fenton got married, and she got married on April 11th. So this is well after she resigned. In early May, after the Times began reporting this article, Miss Russini responded to a reporter's request for an interview via text message. She cited, quote, the intense scrutiny and personal attacks she had faced, saying, quote, this has had significant impact on my life, both professionally and personally. Well, no shit. It continues. At the end of the message, referring to herself as a former journalist, Miss Russini asked the reporter not to quote from the text. The interaction demonstrated a different approach to journalism from the way that it is conducted in traditional newsrooms. When the reporter told her that this article would include portions of her text message because no agreement had been made for them to engage in an off-the-record correspondence, Miss Russini objected and then emailed Mr. Perpich, the publisher of The Athletic, as well as two senior editors at the Times, to reiterate her wish that her comments not be included. Okay. Let me tell you my issue with this story. And this goes back to something that I just randomly remember years ago. Years ago, I was watching the Sean Hannity show on Fox News. And there was a story about Liberty University in the New York Times and the Liberty University president, and I don't even remember what the story was. But the reason I remember this is because Sean Hannity sat there and he talked about the New York TP Times, the New York toilet paper Times, because as he said, that's all they're good for, is to use it for toilet paper. And I only remember that because about a week later, Sean Hannity started pumping his book, which was on the New York Times bestseller. And I'm like, so is it toilet paper, Sean, or is it not? But I say that because of this. When people attack the media, it's very easy, especially when media attacks the media. And I see people that host shows, I see people like Sean Hannity on Fox News say things like, the media. And I watch that and I think, you're the media. And while I think there are a lot of dishonest people in the media, just like I think there's a lot of dishonest people in finance, I think there's dishonest people in law enforcement, I think there's dishonest people in government, I think there's dishonest people in the lunchroom cafeteria. I think dishonesty runs rampant in our society. That doesn't mean that I think everybody's dishonest, but that I think there are a lot of people out there that are very inherently dishonest. I have never fully gotten on board with the idea that the media is dishonest. I definitely think individuals in the media have been dishonest. Sometimes I think individuals in the media actually believe the things they say, even though the things they say may be batshit insane. But I've never sat there and looked at an institution and said, that whole thing is dishonest. This piece from the New York Times, in my opinion, is almost as dishonest as it gets. A lot of the investigative research that was done into this Dianna Vrabel story came from podcasts that she did with Stu Gatz and with Katie Nolan. Anybody could have done that. Tony Farmer, this weirdo on Twitter who has dedicated his life to sleuthing Vrabel and Russini, he could have done all of that. This is a New York Times story covering the New York Times in which, just shockingly, the end result was blame Dianna for her conduct. Don't blame us. And I have a hard time with that. And I am fascinated by what that investigation is going to show. But I am a subscriber to the New York Times. When the leader of Hezbollah was killed, and I'll be honest with you, I didn't know much about Lebanon at the time. I went on my phone to the New York Times because I wanted to read about the leader of Hezbollah dying. And again, while I know there are some in the media that are dishonest, I never look again at the institution and say, that network is dishonest. That publication is dishonest. And there are some that just have more credibility than others. The New York Times and the Washington Post and some of these others, for the most part, they have more credibility than, say, whatever local publication there is out there. And so for the New York Times to write a story about Dianna, when the people at the New York Times have access to people at the New York Times, I'm pretty sure that if the New York Times is going to write an investigative piece on Dianna Russini, it's probably been okayed by the CEO of the New York Times, then the CEO of the New York Times can comment in the story. She wasn't made available for interviews. Zach Rosenblatt. How many interviews has Zach Rosenblatt done over the years? And I have no idea the answer to this, but how many interviews has he done talking about the Jets secondary? I bet when he and Dianna came out with those stories about how bad things were in New York, when it came to Woody Johnson and Robert Saleh and Aaron Rodgers and Joe Douglas, I'm sure Zach Rosenblatt did some interviews there. But he can't do an interview here about his involvement and how he used Dianna, who was fucking the coach, in order to get a story that a lot of people were going to read. And of course, it was a pro-Vrabel story because Vrabel wouldn't have agreed to do it through his mistress if it wasn't going to be a pro-Vrabel story. The New York Times needs to do what everybody else in all of these stories involving Vrabel and Russini just can't do. They need to be accountable. It's so hard, apparently, for people to just be accountable when it comes to making mistakes or taking risks and looking the other way. And that's probably what happened here. Again, it's been well documented. I've thought Vrabel and Russini were having an affair since March of 2022. It's now been well documented that that affair goes back to at least March of 2020. But I spent an entire year highlighting the uniqueness of Mike Vrabel and Dianna Russini's career and their relationship, and the fact that, wow, Dianna Russini has a lot of scoops on the Titans. Wow, C.J. Stroud was not going number 2 overall until Dianna Russini linked to the world that the Titans were trying to move up with Arizona at 3 to be able to get him. Wow, Dianna has a lot of stories here with the Titans. Dianna has a lot of sources with the Titans. I remember there was a tweet I had in 2024 that all of a sudden Dianna didn't have as much info on the Titans. What happened there? And the reason that Dianna's career has been shattered, she was making $800,000 a year, which, again, I actually think $800,000 is underpaying Dianna Russini for what she's probably worth. I don't think she'll ever make $800,000 a year again. So her professional career has been shattered. But the biggest reason why this was such an issue for her and Vrabel is because they could not admit to what happened. They wouldn't do it. Instead of just putting their hands up and saying, yeah, it looks bad. It is bad. It's a personal issue. We have to address it with our families. We apologize, and we hope we can earn back everybody's trust for what we did. Instead of saying that, they lied. And the second they started lying is the second everybody started coming after them. The New York Times, they lied too. This story wanted to make sure to point out that when the New York Post was asking The Athletic and Steven Ginsburg for some sort of a statement, that Steven Ginsburg was on vacation and he only saw one of the photos, so that is why he defended her. Or he defended her because they didn't think that was a big deal. But they won't say that. They, again, want you to know he was on vacation. He only saw one of the photos. He didn't see all the photos. It's the New York Times covering for the New York Times. And if the New York Times is going to drop an investigative piece that, again, doesn't make its own people available, can't get comment from the reporter who reported on a story at the heart of their investigation surrounding Dianna Russini's conduct, again, these are reporters. They have their phones in their hands. How are we supposed to believe that the New York Times is telling the truth about anything? How are we supposed to believe that when the New York Times runs this internal investigation and the results come out, how are we to believe that this is actually going to be about journalistic integrity and not about covering their own asses, which, again, it looks like it's going to be? And I'm just going to tell you, again, I'm a subscriber to the New York Times. The one thing they need to say in this is we fucked up. We had our inklings about Vrabel and Dianna, or we knew. We had our inklings. But with that came access, and we wanted access. We were paying her $800,000 a year for access. Just like ESPN's paying Adam Schefter $9 million a year for access. Just say it. Just say that, hey, we thought in this kind of space, this is all transactional anyways. It's transactional with Schefter. It's transactional with Rappaport. It's transactional with Pelissero. It's transactional with Albert Breer. It's transactional with Peter Schrager. It's transactional with Shams Charania. It's transactional with Jeff Passan. I don't know. Just say, hey, we thought that in order to be in the game, you got to play the game. And Dianna was playing the game. And we got caught. And we realize the intense conflict of interest that comes with that. And because of that, we've moved on. But they can't do it. Instead, they take podcasts she did with Katie Nolan that anybody could have listened to, where Dianna was FaceTiming with Vrabel in the lobby of Katie Nolan's apartment complex. It's a joke. It's embarrassing. And so when I saw the New York Times had some real juice, I thought, yes. I thought, here we go. We're going to get some more info on Vrabel and Russini, how far this goes back, what new info there is, what they came up with. And instead, it was the New York Times reports that the New York Times did not make the head people at the New York Times available for comment. That would be like PaulKaharski.com not making Paul Kaharski available for a story written about Paul Kaharski. Think about that. It's ridiculous. And it's a total, this entire thing has been a total affront to journalism. And this New York Times piece continues with that. Which makes me wonder, how much can we really believe the investigation when it's complete? I just don't understand why they can't just come out and say, hey, insider trade is a dirty business and we got caught up in it. Instead, let's use Katie Nolan's podcast as the end-all be-all for this, and let's treat it like this is some other entity we're covering. Let's treat this like we're the New York Times and we're covering the New York Post. Not we're the New York Times and we're covering the New York Times. An abomination. Speaking of abominations, this happened actually while we were live on Monday. I didn't know this until after the show was over. I saw somebody in the chat say Pekka in all caps, and I'm like, Pekka what? Pekka Rinne what? I figured it was something like Pekka Rinne's agreed to join the coaching staff. Pekka Rinne's agreed to something. I don't know. So after I get off the show, I'm minding my own business, and I see that Pekka Rinne is amongst a handful of people being inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in Toronto this October. And my initial thought was, what? And then I saw people posting on social media. I saw the Predators posting on social media. Congratulations to Pekka Rinne. What a well-deserved honor, Pekka. Nobody deserves this more than Pekka Rinne. Pekka Rinne to the Hall of Fame. And I thought, Hall of Fame? Pekka? Really? And so I guess I have to be the bad guy that's going to say, how is Pekka Rinne a Hall of Famer? Like, Pekka Rinne was a very, very good goalie. Pekka Rinne was the backbone of the organization. And the organization did some winning with Pekka Rinne in net. But the Hall of Fame? And I understand that different sports have different justifications for their Hall of Fame. And if there's any Hall of Fame I understand the least, it's probably the Hockey Hall of Fame. I had a problem with David Poile and Shea Weber when they got inducted. I mean, at least David Poile is, all-time wins leader. And even though he didn't win shit as a general manager, he was a general manager for an extended period of time. Fine. If you want to put David Poile in there, you're not going to hear me complain about it. Whatever. Shea Weber, I don't think Shea Weber's a Hall of Famer. But then Robbie Stanley pointed out to me that international competition is really important as far as the Hall of Fame is concerned. And Shea Weber was captain of Canada when they won a gold medal in 2010. So that put Shea Weber over the top. So Shea Weber's in the Hall of Fame. Pekka? And now I feel like I have to be the bad guy as somebody who absolutely adores Pekka Rinne, both the player and the person. I have to be the bad guy to say, on what planet is Pekka Rinne a Hall of Famer? How many cups did he win? 0. He won 1 Vezina trophy. 1. Boomer Esiason won an MVP in the NFL. Should he be in the Hall of Fame? I mean, I was just thinking in my head, if the Hockey Hall of Fame's bar is Pekka Rinne, how many other goalies of this era are going to get in? Is Corey Crawford a Hall of Fame goalie? I mean, Corey Crawford was okay. Carey Price got in, and I actually think that Carey Price is a legitimate Hall of Famer. But if Pekka Rinne got in, is Jordan Bennington going to get into the Hall of Fame? Is Tuukka Rask, who really sucked in some of the biggest moments in his career, is he going to get into the Hall of Fame? Is Matt Murray, who was a flash in the pan for 2 cups in Pittsburgh and has never been heard from since, is he going to get into the Hall of Fame? Is that how low the bar is? And every year I get all worked up when it comes to baseball. When they put guys that, again, they were good players. Scott Rowland was a good player. Hall of Fame? Every now and then the NFL will do this. The NFL will put Edgerrin James in the Hall of Fame. But for the most part, I think the NFL's pretty good at either making you wait for a while or is a little over the top in keeping guys out. I mean, Bill Belichick and Robert Kraft should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't care who they're fucking or who they paid to fuck them or whatever. They should both be in the Hall of Fame for their accomplishments as football people. Bud Adams should be in the Hall of Fame. The NFL, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, apparently it's impossible to get in unless you're Edgerrin James and you somehow trick everybody into thinking you were that important. Pekka? I mean, I remember when Tony Kukoc got inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame, and I thought, Tony Kukoc? And they said, well, there's an international exception, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, when I think Hall of Fame, I think Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman. I think Phil Jackson. I do not think Tony Kukoc or Luke Longley. When I think Hockey Hall of Fame, I think Crosby, Ovechkin. I think great players, generational players. Connor McDavid will make the Hall of Fame. And Connor McDavid should make the Hall of Fame. Pekka Rinne is not Connor McDavid. When it comes to goalies in my lifetime that should make the Hall of Fame, Patrick Waugh should be in the Hall of Fame, and I know he is. Dominic Hasek, Hall of Famer. I think Jonathan Quick has an argument for how he played in those 2 cup finals that he won, unlike Pekka Rinne, where Jonathan Quick stole championships. And even then, I'm like, I don't know, Jonathan Quick is kind of balls outside of those 2 cup finals that he won. I don't think Marc-Andre Fleury is a Hall of Famer. And yet, I guess in hockey, we just put everybody in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I guess Philip Forsberg, who's, I don't even think truly a first-line winger. I think Philip Forsberg might end up making the Hall of Fame. Whereas I think the Hall of Fame should be reserved for guys like Peter Forsberg. And I was just thinking off the top of my head, I'm like, all right, if Pekka Rinne is a Hall of Famer, how many Tennessee Titans are not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame that should be in the Hall of Fame? And before you tell me that hockey is different than football, when I think Hall of Fame, I think Hall of Fame. I tell people this about MVP awards. I tell people this about all-star teams. I tell people this all the time. Whenever you want to poo-poo something, I'm like, look, man, a gold jacket is a gold jacket. So when you say, hey, I mean, yeah, he was a Hall of Famer, but at the end of the day, he's got a gold jacket. And so if you're a Hall of Famer, there is no higher honor you can receive. There is not a single higher honor Pekka Rinne can receive in hockey than being named to the Hall of Fame. And as much as I love Pekka Rinne, and I love Pekka Rinne the guy, I don't think Pekka Rinne qualifies for that high of an honor. But if Pekka Rinne is a Hall of Famer, here is who from the Titans / Oilers of, the Titan generation should be in the Hall of Fame. Bud Adams, Jeff Fisher. Yeah, he only went to 1 Super Bowl and lost it, and he was terrible with the Rams, and he was the 8-8 coach, but Jeff Fisher won a buttload of games. Floyd Reese got to 1 Super Bowl just like Pekka, good general manager. Steve McNair, league MVP, got to a Super Bowl. He should be in the Hall of Fame. Eddie George, Derek Mason. At that point, I'm like, does Delaney Walker belong in the Hall of Fame? If Pekka Rinne is a Hall of Famer? Jarrell Casey, Javon Curse, Blaine Bishop, Frank Wycheck. If Pekka Rinne is a Hall of Famer, there are about 15 guys that played for the Titans that belong in Canton. And to be completely honest with you all, other than Bud Adams, I don't think a single Titan player belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I have a lot of respect with Derek. I worked with Derek for a long time. I love Derek. I personally don't think Derek belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Now, I think there are other guys that are in the Pro Football Hall of Fame that have weaker resumes than Derek, but I would not put, when I think Derek Mason, when I think Hall of Famer, I think Larry Fitzgerald. I think Calvin Johnson. I think Jerry Rice. I think, again, not made a Pro Bowl here or there. I think generational player. I don't think Eddie George should be in the Hall of Fame. I don't think Steve McNair should be in the Hall of Fame. I certainly don't think Jeff Fisher should be in the Hall of Fame. I named my kid after Floyd Reese. I don't think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I'm an Atlanta Braves fan. I grew up watching the Braves in the 90s on TBS every night during the summer. 6:05 or 6:35. I became a huge fan of Friends because Friends would be on TBS before the Braves games would come on. Not because everybody was watching Friends on Thursday night on NBC. I didn't care about Friends then. But when I started watching Friends before the Braves would come on TBS, so I love the Braves. When Andrew Jones got put into the Baseball Hall of Fame, there was a part of me that was like, Maddox, yes. Glavine, yes. Smoltz, yes. Chipper Jones, yes. Bobby Cox, yes. Andrew Jones? Really? Well, he is the best defensive center fielder of my lifetime. I agree. But outside of 1 year where Andrew Jones hit 51 home runs, there were oftentimes where Andrew Jones was a liability at the plate. And I'm not saying Andrew Jones wasn't a very good player. I'm just saying there is a difference, in my opinion, between a very good player and the Hall of Fame. And I don't know, again, when the Hall of Fames were established. When the Hockey Hall of Fame, the Baseball Hall of Fame, Basketball Hall of Fame, etc. When they were established, I don't necessarily know what the guideline was for each individual one about the Hall of Fame. But for me, it's very simple. If 10 of us are sitting there and we bring up a guy's name and we're almost all like, oh yeah, then he's a Hall of Famer. If I bring up Peyton Manning's name, we sit there and we say, oh yeah. If I bring up Patrick Kane's name, we would all agree Patrick Kane belongs in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Jonathan Toews belongs in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Alexander Ovechkin belongs in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Sidney Crosby belongs in the Hockey Hall of Fame. If we all sat there and we said Pekka Rinne, what argument is there for Pekka to be in the Hall of Fame? And this, again, is coming from a guy who loves Pekka. I was begging John Hines' dumbass to make Pekka Rinne the starting goalie for Game 4 of the Arizona series in the bubble because I thought Pekka might still have that juice because when Pekka was on, Pekka was the man. But the Hall of Fame? Like, we're going to sit there and we're going to say that he and Alexander Ovechkin are both worthy of the highest honor that you can receive as a hockey player? Give me a break. It's crazy. And again, I'm happy for Pekka. And I'm sure the Predators will have a Pekka night at the stadium. It'll be the 18th Pekka night they've had since he's retired. They put a statue out there for him. They retired his number. They put him into the team's Hall of Fame. And now they'll probably celebrate him getting into the Hall of Fame. And they'll probably have a bobblehead night around it and everything else. So they do whatever they want. I have a hard time celebrating Pekka Rinne as a Hall of Famer because I know in my heart he's not a Hall of Famer. What we consider the best of the best of the best, the Hall of Fame, he's not that. Again, Hall of Fame. Tom Brady, Hall of Fame. Babe Ruth, Hall of Fame. Michael Jordan, Hall of Fame. Bobby Orr, Hall of Fame. Gordie Howe, Hall of Fame. Wayne Gretzky, Hall of Fame. Pekka Rinne is not Gordie Howe. He is not Bobby Orr. He's not Sidney Crosby. He's not Alexander Ovechkin. He's not any of these guys. And you want to put him in the Hall of Fame? Crazy. And again, some of you people are like, can you believe that? Why? How can you think Pekka's not a Hall of Famer? I'm like, because he was a really good player. And being a really good player and enshrined in immortality are two totally different things. I think Pekka deserves to have his number retired by the team, just like I think Shea Weber deserves to have his number retired by the team, just like I think that Roman Josi will deserve to have his number retired by the team, just like I think Philip Forsberg will deserve to have his number retired by the team. And I'm not one of these guys who thinks there should be 2 or 3 numbers that are up there. I think Derrick Henry's number should be retired by the Titans. But I don't think Ryan Tannehill belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I don't think Philip Forsberg is a Hall of Famer. Josi would be on the borderline for me. Rinne? He went to 1 cup final and he lost it. The next year, he won the Vezina Trophy. He won one Vezina Trophy. And he was dog shit in those playoffs in 2018. 2 years later, he lost his job. And he's in the Hall of Fame? Are they going to put Soros in the Hall of Fame? Like, is that all it requires? Hey, did you start for a team for 10 years? Okay, you're in the Hall of Fame. Did you make a Stanley Cup final? Okay, Martin Jones, you're in the Hall of Fame. Again, when you tell me, Brandon here says, are you kidding me, bro? I watch your show every day and just watch. Don't comment on any take you have, but this one, you're way, way off. I'm like, dude, we're talking about the Hall of Fame. We're talking about Wayne Gretzky. We're talking about Dominic Hasek and Patrick Waugh and the great goalies of all time. You know, guys who won cups, guys who were great for 15 years. When I think Hall of Fame in baseball, I don't think Scott Rowland or Billy Wagner. I think Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. Pekka? I totally agree with Pekka's number being retired by the team. And the team's Hall of Fame, I totally agree with the 3 inductees they have in now. And again, I would put Philip Forsberg in. I would put Roman Josi in when their time comes, and I'd retire their numbers. I thought the statue was a little much. And I know the team loves Pekka more than anything in the world. I'm not knocking it. I thought the statue was a little much. But he is the best player in the history of the Predators. So fine, if you want to build him a statue, build him. The Hall of Fame? The Hall of Fame? Goodness gracious. It's like TDG said, Dave Justice. Dave Justice was a very, very good player in the 90s. He was not Cal Ripken Jr. He was not Ken Griffey Jr. That is Hall of Fame. And I know, again, with like Sosa and Bonds and Clemens, there's kind of question marks there. Kurt Schilling, I guess, is not getting into the Hall of Fame because he's a right winger. But again, think of the great players of the sport. When we think of the greatest, if I were to say Wayne Gretzky or Bobby Orr, and you were to say, well, does Sidney Crosby belong? Yes, Sidney Crosby belongs in that discussion with that group. So does Alexander Ovechkin. So do all of the, again, great bona fide Hall of Famers. Pekka is not one of those guys. Give me a fucking break. Unbelievable. And then I have to be the bad guy. I love Pekka. I think Pekka's one of the nicest guys I've ever met. One of the nicest guys I've ever covered. He's classy. He was accountable. When they lost, he went up there and he spoke. He had the ups. He had the downs. He never threw his teammates under the bus. He never threw his coaches under the bus. Pekka Rinne was a great leader of this organization for years and years and years. He's not a Hall of Famer. And then I have to feel like the bad guy to sit here and say, we're putting him in the Hall of Fame? Really? Brendan Sorsby, got to get to this topic. So yesterday, and I'm actually a little torn. So yesterday, the NFL came out and said, we're not having a supplemental draft this year. Sorry, Brendan Sorsby, about your luck. What that means is he can't play NFL football next year. And because he wanted to enter the supplemental draft, he dropped his lawsuit against the NCAA, and he can't play college football next year either. The NFL is essentially doing what that district court in Texas wouldn't do. They are suspending Brendan Sorsby from real football competition in 2026. And I'm torn on this. And I'm torn on this for two reasons. On one hand, I do take gambling seriously, and I understand why the NFL takes gambling seriously. So the NFL looks at gambling, and they say, we are afraid that if people think our games are tossed or our games are rigged, then we become pro wrestling. And we make $1 gazillion every year, and it's only going up, and people are only watching football more, and they're only doing it because nobody really thinks the outcomes are rigged. And that's important. And the second people start to think the outcomes are rigged, they're going to stop watching. They're going to stop investing. They're going to stop spending their money on football. I get it. On the other hand, this is the NFL. This is not the morality police. What Brendan Sorsby did, he did in college. He didn't do that in the NFL. The NFL supplemental draft is for bad apples. Guys like Josh Gordon and other guys, Terrell Pryor, that broke NCAA rules and have now been kicked out of there, and say, okay, well, I would have gone into the draft, but now the rules have changed, so now I'm going into the draft. I would let the 32 teams decide whether or not you're going to draft Brendan Sorsby. But I'm not sure who wins in this by suspending Sorsby for a year. I don't think Sorsby wins. He needs to be playing football. I don't think the teams win. There could be a team out there that could use Brendan Sorsby, or could use him as bait, or could use him as a developmental quarterback, or whatever. And I don't really know how it helps the NFL other than to say, yeah, we put our foot down for that kid that gambled about it and showed no remorse. Which, again, I'm fine with. If the NFL truly was immoral in how they go about running their league. But I don't think they are. And yet on the other side, the one rule I truly believe in, and I've said this time and time again, I believe that if you break a rule, you're banned. And I don't mean any rule. I'm talking about the gambling rule. I've said, I think there should be a law. And this should be a law in the United States for every single one of these major sports. Hockey, football, basketball, baseball, college sports. And it should be a law because the law is what you make of it. If Congress got together today and decided that everybody in the NFL had to wear long pants every single day at practice, then everybody who played in the NFL would have to wear long pants every day at practice, even though I think most of us believe that that's not really within the scope of what the NFL is supposed to do. But I believe there should be a law. If you bet on the sport you play, you're banned. So if you bet on college football and you play college football, I don't care if you are at Appalachian State and you are a red shirt and you bet on the championship game, banned. If you play in the NBA and you bet on NBA basketball, banned. You bet on baseball and you play baseball, banned. So I have no problem with Brendan Sorsby being banned from playing college sports. But this idea that Brendan Sorsby's not allowed to enter the supplemental draft, I don't know if that's right. And I really hate this for the player because even though for the most part, I do believe in, hey, if you're good, you can take a year off and you'll still be good. Michael Vick went to jail and he came back and he was still really good. I always think young quarterbacks need to be in a daily system. They don't need to play every day because some guys need to sit the bench, but they need to be coached every day. They need to be working on their mechanics. They need to be in a film room. They need to be, and I think Brendan Sorsby needs that. I don't think it's the NFL's job to get Brendan Sorsby a career, but I do think the NFL has to be fair in how they adjudicate their rules. And I love the fact that part of the NFL's ruling was, well, the deadline came up last week and you submitted your paperwork a couple days before the deadline, so we didn't have all the information to be able. So is it the deadline or is it not the deadline? If he got his paperwork in before the deadline, don't give me the deadline as the excuse. Don't be giving people deadlines and then saying, well, you didn't turn it in fast enough. That's not how life works. So I'm a little torn on this. I do understand why the NFL would want to put their foot down on Sorsby. I just think the NFL is overstepping here. They've had supplemental drafts for years. They've also had a lot of years where they haven't had supplemental drafts, but they have had supplemental drafts for guys that have been kicked out of the NCAA before. I think Brendan Sorsby deserves a chance to be in the supplemental draft. And finally, boy, I am just getting taken to task for a take I had on Twitter. So there is a woman that went viral for taking an orange and blue Knicks themed trash can from the parade and dumping the garbage out and then taking the trash can with her as a souvenir. And she is a rather portly woman. And the idea of taking out the trash can and dumping it on the street is disgusting. And this is not something I would have done. But apparently she is an executive or was an executive at JP Morgan Chase. And she is a DEI executive. And when it comes to this DEI executive, apparently she's been fired. And last night on Twitter, I said, look, regardless of the position, because as soon as it came out that she was a DEI executive, people were like, yeah, that's what she deserves because she's a DEI executive. DEI is bad. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think, a lot of the DEI stuff's a little out there. But I knew people were going to get excited about this woman getting fired because she's big, she's ugly, and she's a DEI executive. And there are people that don't like big, ugly women, especially big, ugly DEI executives. And I'm just going to tell you how I feel. And boy, Twitter got mad at me yesterday. I don't think that's a fireable offense. Is it embarrassing to take a trash can, dump it, and then steal the trash can? Yeah, it's embarrassing. Should it be beneath an executive at JP Morgan? Yeah, it should be beneath the executive at JP Morgan. Is it disgusting because you're throwing all that trash right there on the ground? Yeah, it's disgusting. But is it worth firing somebody? I mean, there are a lot of people that have done a lot of bad things, and I am not a whataboutism guy who sits there and says, well, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? I just think about it like this. If I owned a company and there was a viral video of one of my employees taking a souvenir trash can, I wouldn't fire him over it. Yeah, it's disgusting. Yeah, it's lowbrow. Fireable. And the people out there that are like, that is public property, Jared Stillman. That is public property. People litter on, deface, take public property every day. I'm not that worked up there. A woman got fired over it, and everybody's like, yeah! And again, I think the reason she got fired is because she's a DEI executive, and people don't like DEI. One person says, Jared, I need to call you out. You don't want the show to be political. If that's the case, you can't state your opinion on DEI and openly support Jason Aldean. Why can't I openly support Jason Aldean or talk about the fact that I don't think we need DEI executives? I mean, is that political? I don't think it's political. I don't necessarily think it's necessary. But again, I'm not worked up about it. I think the woman should keep her job. I don't think she should be fired. And, again, throwing all the stuff on the street, like, that's gross and it's wrong. But there are a lot of wrong things people do all the time that they don't get fired for. Like, if you steal some pens from work, is that a fireable offense? I don't steal pens from work. But if you do, I'm not going to fire you over it. I might rip your ass about it, but I'm not going to fire you over it. One person says, did you watch the Sam Darnold interview on Bussin' with the Boys? I did not. Was it any good? You guys tell me. One person says, say it, Jared. You are in love with Vrabes, LOL. First of all, I don't call Mike Vrabel Vrabes. I'm not his buddy. I do like Vrabel. I'm sure Vrabel does not like me. But I never considered myself a member of the team. I never considered myself his friend. I don't call him that. And I'm not in love with Vrabel, but this, again, was a humongous story in the New York Times. TDG says, Pekka is the Preds GOAT. Sure, Pekka's the best player in the history of the Preds. That still does not mean that you are at the level of Alexander Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby, which is my whole point. That's it for us. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends, Stillman and company. By the way, we got some ideas of what we're going to do the rest of the summer as well. We should be back Friday, perhaps maybe tomorrow. Who knows? We do 3 a week. 2 o'clock, Stillman and company. We'll see you then.